Audio Network with Dave Mishkin and Greg Linnelli.
You know, we went out there and you know, played for him. He's one of us. He's, you know, we're family in here, and he wasn't able to go, and we just, you know, talked about it, just got to step up and you know, take a game at a time and go out there and win that one for him. And we know he's going to be back and he's going to be buzzing in this next one. So unfortunate that he couldn't be out there with us, but just what he brings to our team and just the energy he brought that day, and you just see how excited he was, you know, that we got that win. So I'm sure he's ready to go for tomorrow night.
It's a series that, have there been scrums? Has there been physicality? Has there been nastiness? Sure there has. Have, for the most part, have both teams been penalized for it? Probably. You know, could one argue one is maybe not as much as the other? You could. I'm not going to tell you who, but yeah, you could. But in the end, the players are all competitive, and this is what you get. And it's I think the fans enjoy it. I think that's what makes the playoffs great, is that you're watching 20 players on each side give everything they have, sacrifice their bodies and for their team. That's why this sport is the greatest.
All right, Greg is here. Greg is reloading. Dave Mishkin alongside Greg Linnelli soon. Steve Ersnick, our producer. Monday Power Lunch in advance of Game 4, Lightning Panthers. Lightning trail the best of 7-game series, 2-1. Greg was right there. If you were watching on the video stream, you saw him for like half a second. I think Greg is rebooting. So the Lightning have a morning skate. Originally, they did not have a morning skate scheduled. They had a practice scheduled for Sunday. John Cooper decided to give the team, maybe it was in consultation with the players, but the team had the day off yesterday. So they are hoofing down, and they have hoofed down to Sunrise, which is a considerable distance from where the team is staying in Fort Lauderdale, for the morning skate. That skate has concluded. The team is on its way back to the hotel where I stayed to get ready for this show. And we can tell you that Brandon Hagel is back in the lineup. Not surprisingly, he has served his 1-game suspension. Anthony Cirelli did not participate in the morning skate, as clearly he is still battling, or dealing, maybe is the better word, with what took him out of Game 1. But John Cooper said Cirelli is going to be in the lineup tonight. So with Hagel coming back in, the Lightning are going to have to make a lineup decision based on who is in the lineup in game number 3. And as Greg is about to rejoin us, we can get into that and see if the Lightning elect to scratch a defenseman and go 12-6, or take out one of the forwards who played in game number 3. But welcome back.
Hi, partner. How you
my
doing?
Friend. Yeah.
Had a reboot there.
Yeah, you had to reboot. That was exquisite timing, because you were with us for, the 5 minutes leading
I was.
up
I
to
heard all
the
that
open.
audio.
Yeah.
It was good.
So Jay Retcher and I did a show yesterday, and during that show, we had a lot to cover. We recapped Game 3. We talked about the Hagel suspension, which when we signed off on Friday, because we pre-taped on Friday, we weren't even aware that he was going to have a hearing. And naturally, I stated rather forcefully, like, I'll be very surprised if there's a hearing and there's a suspension. Well, there was, and of course, this is all old news now, but it's the first time we've really had a chance to talk since that ruling came down. And then, of course, in Game 3, there was the hit Tkachuk on Gensel, which we learned yesterday there will be no supplemental discipline. I did say, so again, Jay Retcher and I in the show yesterday, we did it in the morning. And at the time we did the show, we didn't know yet about Tkachuk. Jay felt he should have been suspended. I said, I don't think he's going to get suspended. I didn't think Hagel should have been suspended. And I don't think Tkachuk should have been suspended, and he wasn't, be that as it may. But I'll hand the baton to you. Why don't you give me your thoughts on what you saw in Game 3 and anything else you want to touch on, and we can kind of circle back and recap Game 3 and look ahead to Game 4.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. And I tend to agree with Jay, and maybe it's because if you're going to suspend Hagel, you probably should have suspended Tkachuk. I mean, that was a late hit, and it's a dangerous hit. I think those are hits that you want to take out of your game, and I think I've seen a few of those hits these playoffs, unfortunately, where a player is away from the puck and there's just big time collisions happening. And look, Tom Wilson last night, his was legit, and it changed the complexion of that game. And I understand that. So I was surprised, like you, that they reviewed it. And
the Hagel one.
The Hagel one, correct.
Yeah.
I guess maybe the point being I'm never surprised what the league does. Mm-hmm. So I think maybe that's part of it. In terms of Game 3, I won't bore everybody. I thought we kept hearing about the Panthers championship pedigree. I thought the Lightning showed us that in Game 3. I also said to you off the air that maybe it hasn't been a talking point because he hasn't been tested. But I don't know if Sergei Bobrovsky has been the iron curtain, so to speak, that many people think he is through 3 games. I don't think he's been tested. Now, that's a credit to Florida and what they've been able to do defensively on the Lightning. But, the goal that he gave up, was it to Paul, right? Where it hit off his skate. I think that might have been going wide and it trickles in. That's a softie. That's a bad goal. And I want to see more pucks on net, easier said than done. But it's not like we're dealing with Patrick Waugh here in net. And I know Paul Maurice talked about in Game 2, Bobrovsky, and what a professional he is. He works on his craft, and that's all true. Hall of Famer, going to be that guy at the end. When it's all said and done, he's going to have the stats and the ring to back that up. But I still think the Lightning can get to him. They just have to generate a few more shots. And I thought, look, you got some role players who came up big. Anytime you get a goal from Luke Linnelli, you should win a game. Mm-hmm. And what's the Lightning's record when Luke Linnelli scores?
That has been true during his time with the Lightning.
I mean, that's been impressive.
It's like the Cy Young winner in baseball, 14-0 or something.
It's true.
Like that.
But you needed Cooch, Gensel, and Point specifically. I think when we talk about it, you needed them to have an impact on the game, and I thought they did. So where does that leave us? Now, the pressure's still on Tampa Bay. I mean, you got to even this thing out, and winning 2 games on the road is hard to do. And what the Panthers did, you don't want to minimize that. But the Lightning are capable of having another good game tonight. And I think now the pressure a little bit back on Florida. Let's see how they react. Mm-hmm. And I do think playing with a lead helps. Let's face it, the Lightning had not done that leading up to Game 3. So stating some of the obvious, but sometimes the obvious needs to be stated when you're talking about what are you going to do to win a game. And I think for the Lightning, getting a lead and testing Bobrovsky would be 2 things that I want to see continue. And then from there, I can't control what the officials are going to call. I can't call and look at special teams because I just don't know how that's going to play out. But if the Lightning can now build off of their 3rd game in a row partner where it's been ascending, it's a positive sign because Game 2 they were better than in Game 1. Game 3 they were better in Game 2. And let's see if tonight they're better, even if it's just a little bit, than Game 3. I think they're going to put themselves in a pretty good position here to come away and get a W. But we know the Panthers should be ready. And I anticipate this game. I don't think you're going to have maybe the extra stuff unless the Lightning are winning late and the Panthers are really frustrated and they want to send a message, as they always say, heading into Game 5. I've got to think this is going to be a game where maybe that extra stuff subsides a bit because this is a pivotal game. Lightning even this up 2-2, it's anybody's game. Florida goes up 3-1. That's tough for any team to come back. So I think both teams are going to be super focused, laser focused on tonight. And I'm wondering if we see less of the shenanigans and more of the just go out and play some hockey and let's see what happens.
Well, I would have thought maybe the shenanigans would have died down already.
Yeah.
Particularly because some of the post-whistle scrums have not resulted in even ups. They've been like taking one guy. And it feels like except for the Tkachuk play near the end of the second period in Game 3, it's been the Lightning. The Lightning have been the team getting the player with the penalty. End of the second period, Cirelli goes. It was one of the games in Tampa. Gensel had a post-whistle scrum where he was involved. There were a bunch of players involved, but he was the only guy who got sent off. Right. But it's happened on both sides, and that is usually a little bit of the caution flag gets waved, right? Be very careful. Cirelli was asked about that in that off-day media session, yesterday, and he's like, basically, you're in it, your emotions run high. He's like, maybe we need to, eat a stick and skate away. We'll see.
Sure. Yeah.
I felt that Game 3. So there were a few things that happened in Game 3 that we did not see for the most part in the first two games. One of the things we saw in Game 3 was a much more sustained attack from the Florida Panthers.
Right.
And a lot of that attack happened in the first period once they went up 1-0. So there were different key points in Game 3. I thought one of them was when it was 1-0 Florida until the Lightning tied it at 1, and that was when Andrei Vasilevsky, in some ways, saved the game and maybe saved the season for the Lightning. Because the Panthers applied a lot of pressure. As I mentioned on yesterday's Power Lunch show, I felt the Panthers had more scoring chances in Game 3 than they had in the first two games combined. Understanding they had some grade A chances in Game 1, they just didn't have a lot of them. They only had 16 shots. But the ones they had were tremendous, and they finished. That's how they ended up scoring 6 goals. Game 3, they had a more sustained attack. And a lot of that happened in the first period. And Vasi was really tested. I mean, there were some chances right in front of the net. Barkov and Verhaeghe in particular. Ekblad, who had a weird game because he finished -4, actually felt he played pretty well for a guy who had missed 2 months. He was a little bit of an unlucky minus. We can get into what happened, to him in Game 3, but he had a tremendous chance early in the game where he got loose right in the slot. And that was just not well done by the Lightning. Right. So, I agree with what you're saying, that the Lightning, certainly their Game 3 performance in many ways was better than what we saw in the 2 home games, and they got the win. But the first period, we saw some of the problems that they had earlier in the series resurface. Problems clearing the zone, problems giving up open looks in front. Vasi saved their bacon. He did. And then, certainly another key point, not only in Game 3, but in the series, would the Lightning's top guys be able to make some plays? And Gensel and Kucherov make a play. And they make a play against the best defensive unit Paul Maurice can throw out there. He had the Barkov line out there. Barkov has won the Selke Trophy. Reinhart is a terrific, he's not only a great goal scorer, he is a terrific two-way player. And they had Forsling out there. And the play starts with Forsling having the puck in the defensive zone, and Gensel intercepts the clearing attempt. We're not talking about the 7th or 8th defenseman who's forced into duty here for Florida because they had injuries or they decided to rest guys. This is their very best defensive defenseman. And he had a tough game, Forsling. He makes a mistake. He puts it in an area where Gensel can make a play on it. Gensel intercepts it. Goes to Kucherov. Kucherov eludes the pressure. Remember, we were fielding these questions about, Kucherov has no time and space. What is he going to do? Well, one thing Kucherov can do is stick handle through it. It's tough, and a lot of times he's unable to do it. That time he did. He squeezed through two Panther defenders, slipped it to Gensel, and Gensel walks around Reinhart. So, the number of errors defensively the Panthers made in about a 5-second span there that they weren't really making for the most part earlier in the series led to this goal. Now, the Lightning were able to make the plays, but the Panthers were unable to prevent the play from being made. That was as big of a key to that first goal as anything else. And then Gensel, because he walks around Reinhart, gets to a better position on the ice to shoot. He shoots, it hits point, and deflects in 1-1. Totally different game from that point on. First time in the whole series the Lightning weren't trailing going into an intermission. It was the first time really that they got to play a little bit tied and not chasing. And the score effects mattered. And yes, then they got the lead in the second period. But even in the second period, Vasi had some points where it was less sustained, the pressure, but he had to make some big saves. They got through a penalty kill in the middle of that second period. And so, like you pointed out, Bobrovsky didn't play the Paul shot very well. That's fair. It went through him. You don't like seeing that if you're a goalie or somebody rooting for a team whose goalie allowed a shot to go through him. Maybe it was going wide, hit his skate, and went in. But if you're the Panthers, if you're Paul Maurice, what you're looking at is, how is this a 2-on-1? What the heck happened? It wasn't even a rush up the ice. It was off a zone entry. And what happened was the Lightning do a regroup in the neutral zone. McDonough to Paul to Gonsalves. Gonsalves skates it across the blue line. Forsling again.
Yeah.
Forsling again makes the mistake. Forsling comes to Gonsalves to try and close him off. That opens up a lane for Paul, and Gonsalves makes a beautiful backhand pass to him. Now you got a 2-on-1 down low. And you got Nick Paul shooting the puck. I mean, he could shoot the puck. So, yes, maybe it was a goal that you want Bobrovsky to stop, but there were other elements on that play that affected the goal being scored, which we weren't seeing earlier in the series. The Lightning weren't getting 2-on-1s in games 1 and 2. And they had a handful of them in game 3. And then, of course, the other big goal was early in the third. You're thinking, the Lightning are going on the penalty kill here in 24 seconds. They only have a 2-1 lead. This Panthers power play is dangerous, even though the Lightning have done well. Again, they didn't have Hagel. And on that kill, they didn't have Cirelli, which happened twice, where they were without 2 of their main penalty killers. And Kucherov makes the play. I mean, we've seen him do this blind from behind the net, sometimes a forehand, sometimes a backhand. This was a backhand. And when I first saw the goal scored, I'm like, Bobrovsky got reeled in by, he didn't know Kucherov was going to do this back pass on the short side post. He actually tried to stop it. And in trying to stop it, not only does he not stop the puck, he loses his stick. And Gensel's able to shoot it where the stick was, into the top of the net. 3 goals scored by the Lightning. The first 3 were absolutely huge, huge goals. So after losing the big play metric in games 1 and 2, the Lightning won the big play metric in game 3, a big reason why they won the game, and their penalty kill went 4 for 4. Their power play has not gotten going, but their penalty kill really helped them in game 3, and now they get Hagel back, obviously, who will be pulling on the rope on the penalty kill.
It is incredible.
So getting the lead affected how this game unfolded. You know, the Panthers weren't as tight defensively.
The other team's best players can make mistakes too. I mean, did you have it on your bingo card? Forsling having, a couple
-4. So
yeah,
Ekblad
did you have
and
that?
Forsling were both -4, but it was more on Forsling than on Ekblad on some of these anyway.
Did you think Forsling would even be a -4 for the whole series, let alone a game? I mean, no, probably not. I think you're right about making a play. I think that's what the Lightning did, and I think you've got to force the Panthers into those mistakes. It's hard to do, but the Lightning showed they can do that. And I think, look, Gonsalves continues to chip away offensively. That's a positive sign as well. And I do think there's Jake Gensel scoring a big goal, which he pretty much does every single time. So I think if you're John Cooper, minus the games and going on right now with Paul Maurice, because that's been fun.
They both kind of had a chuckle about it.
They joke
during
around,
the off day
which is great.
session,
which is great. I think if you're the Lightning, there's a lot of things you can build off of. Understanding too that, do you think Forsling's going to have a -4 type game again?
Probably not.
Probably not. He's going to be buttoned up, which makes it even more of a bigger deal tonight that the Lightning do have to be buttoned up themselves, when they are doing some things, not only in the offensive zone, but in the defensive zone as well. So I think both teams can learn from what they did or didn't do in the last game. I think the Lightning now have some juice. And now for the first time, the Panthers got hit in the face, and let's see how they respond in a game like this. But still in the driver's seat. I mean, look, they're still up 2-1
they are.
on home ice. So we have to acknowledge that. But I think the Lightning at least have put themselves in a position where it didn't look great. And now they've given themselves a heartbeat here. And that's going to be super impactful, hopefully at the start of the game tonight, to see the Lightning come out the way I think we all envision they can play.
Usually when a team loses a game in a playoff series, not just this series, look at the other series around the NHL. The first round has been very interesting. I mean, we haven't really touched on a lot of the other series, but I have found the other series to be very intriguing. But usually when a team loses a game, the next game, like there's the two sides of the coin, right? The team that wins is like, wow, they got some juice, which is what you said, right? Like you feel good about your game, builds your confidence. For the losing team, what is usually required, and what we usually see, because these are playoff teams, these are teams that have done very, very well over 6 months in the regular season to get in the playoffs, is some kind of a response. We actually saw a response from the Lightning after they lost game 1 in the first few shifts. I mean, they could have been up 2-0, right? They pressed. The Panthers were back on their heels. That was the Lightning's response, and they got the wind taken out of their sails when the Panthers scored in their first shot. I mean, that affected their push, and they really weren't able to get it back. But generally speaking, like, at least at the beginning of the game, you see pushback from the team that lost the previous game because they've been stewing on this, right? Usually for a couple of days, if not longer, like that St. Louis-Winnipeg series. They've had 2 days off between game 2 and 3 and then 3 and 4. So, and even game 4 yesterday, Winnipeg, which lost, got blown out in game 3. They had a great first period up until the last 30 seconds. They were out shooting the Blues. They had a lead. And then Jake Neighbors scores in the last half minute. And it kind of what happened to the Panthers in game 3, where you're Winnipeg, you're like, we just dominated this first period. Right. How are we 1-1? And then the game got away from them. Yep. So it doesn't mean that the whole game is going to go that way. But I think the Lightning have to be ready for a response. You mentioned Forsling. I would expect he's going to have a bounce-back game in that he's not going to make these same sorts of mistakes.
No.
And he is going to be his usual very steady and reliable self. And, you know, we'll see how this game 4 starts. But if I'm the Lightning, I would expect not just Forsling, but the entire Florida team to try and have a response. I'm not talking about a physical response, although that's part of how they play. I'm talking about, like, a pushback response.
Yep. No doubt.
Because they don't want this series to be 2-2.
I will say this. You're right about that. And if the Lightning are able to come back and advance, I think we will circle game 3. Because I don't think you anticipate having your best players like a Forsling play that way. And maybe they gave the Lightning an opening that maybe they didn't have previously. I mean, it took a star player defensively to maybe have a couple of breakdowns that you just look as a coaching staff. You don't go into a game thinking Ryan McDonough is not going to be where he's supposed to be.
And he had a tough game 1 for the Lightning.
Right. So it happens, but I don't think you anticipate it happening in a game like this.
Forsling all of a sudden didn't become, you know, a turnover machine or a guy who's, you know, misreading a play. It happened in game 3. So we often say hockey is a game of mistakes, and even the best players make mistakes. Just Forsling tends not to make them.
He doesn't make them at all. But you know what? To the Lightning's credit, it also goes back to the momentum question. When you do get those openings, what do you do with it?
Yeah.
To the Lightning's credit, they've done, at least in game 3, they did enough. And I think that's what you want to see. Does that happen tonight? Well, you got to tune in at 7 to find out.
And I think generally your point about getting more shots to Bobrovsky, really that's how I should say it, because there have been games, less so in game 3. What did the Lightning finish with? Well, they had 50 attempts. But I think in every game, you know, the number of shots that they've put on net has been less than 50% of their attempts. They have missed the net a lot in this series. I mean, Victor Hedman in the session yesterday, remember we were talking about it, he had 10 shot attempts in game 2 and not one was on net. He knew his own stats.
Yeah.
Brian Engblom asked him a question about, like, what are you seeing when you're trying to shoot? Is there a guy in the way? And kind of asked it gently, like, basically, what do you need to do to get your shots on net?
Right.
And Victor himself said through the first 2 games, I had 17 shot attempts and not one was on net. Now, he did in game 3, but it's not just Victor. Like, I think the Lightning, it would help the Lightning's cause to force more saves from Bobrovsky, because of what you are saying is actually accurate, that Bobrovsky's game is not as buttoned up as sometimes, I mean, it has been. They wouldn't have won the Stanley Cup without him last year.
For sure.
But, you know, if he's kind of going through a phase here where, you know, he had a tough game 3. He did. He wasn't able to give his team saves. He almost gave up a goal on the first period penalty kill. Glendening shot it down the ice. He comes out to stop it. It slipped right through him.
Looked like a middle infielder.
Yeah, he was lucky. It went through his legs, right?
Yeah,
He was lucky that the puck was not on net. It would have been a goal from whatever, 170 feet,
Well, and the funny thing is,
test him. Test this guy.
That's I think you hit the nail on the head, because
by test, I mean if you have a chance to shoot,
get it on net.
Try and get it on the net. Yeah.
I know it's easier, and I hate saying this because I think it goes without saying. I don't have to keep, and you don't have to keep saying, look, we're in the broadcast booth. Easier said than we all acknowledge that.
There are guys.
These
in
are
the
professionals.
Lanes. Yeah,
these are professionals. They understand. What I'm saying is too. I mean, Bobrovsky might have felt this way through the first 3 games. We just didn't see enough shots on goal for that to really come to the surface, maybe like we saw the 1 goal from Nick Paul in Game 3. In other words, you didn't test him enough to see if he was feeling good about his game. I mean, look, goaltenders are like anybody else. You may be feeling pretty good going into a game, and you can stop everything. But sometimes they go through rough patches. Lightning didn't test him enough through the first couple of games to know if he was in a rough patch. Now you put a seeded down a little bit, and let's see what happens. I find tonight. I do think tonight's a pivotal game. Look, I'm stating the obvious.
Game 4 in a 2-1 series is a huge game,
and the Lightning know that, and so do the Panthers.
Look at Edmonton and LA last night.
I know.
Edmonton's down to the last 36, 37 seconds from going down 3-1. They get the goal.
Incredible.
They've snatched victory from maybe not the jaws of defeat, but they've been down in the third period in both the games they've won. And this is against one of the best defensive teams in the league this year. Now, Edmonton can score. I mean, we know that. If you're down in the third period, you'd probably like to have Edmonton's lineup based on, an ability to come back, and McDavid and Draisaitl and Evan Bouchard. Like, they're 3 main guys from last year's trip to the final with Hyman, who has not been as dynamic to this point through the series. But those other 3 guys are among the top scorers in the playoffs. They're doing what they can offensively. I do think the Kings have outplayed the Oilers and probably should be up, not tied. I don't know that they should have swept, but I mean, one of these games that they had a lead going into the third period, you figure they would have closed out.
Yeah.
So they didn't. So the Oilers were able to rally, and in the playoffs, weird stuff happens. Winnipeg. Connor Hellebuck's going to win the Vezina. I mean, the finalists were announced today. Vasi, Hellebuck, and Kemper, the Kings goalie, are the 3 finalists. You can't argue with that. Hellebuck has been pulled twice in the series against St. Louis in the 2 games they lost.
People were calling MVP, right? And maybe in the regular season, but he's had his problems.
The votes have been cast already.
He's had his problems. You know, and so I want to, put that out there, but sometimes those awards, they are what they are. I can't get caught up in them.
All my point is some really good players defensively, some really good teams defensively, some really great goalies who have had fantastic seasons. You get into a playoff game, weird stuff can happen.
Yep.
Right?
For sure.
One team gets momentum, and it's like a tidal wave, right?
Yeah. 100% correct. At Bolts Radio, if people want to get involved in the conversation. Andrew on Facebook, partner, says, felt like once the Lightning tied it, and even more so when they took the lead halfway through, it took the Panthers out of that tight defensive structure.
Well, I mean, I think they still want to be structured, but you're right, Andrew. Score effects had an effect. We saw the difference in what the Lightning were able to find in terms of time and space when they were tied or up. And there was just more time and space for them than when the Panthers were ahead. But you may fall behind again. And if that's the case, you can't freak out. I mean, you just got to put on your work boots and try and get the game tied.
Yep. It's easy to say when you play from behind or you score first, however you want to phrase it, the other team's going to have to come out of their shell a little bit. But that is true. That is true. You react differently if you're trailing. And the Lightning were in a position to do that in the last game. And I think it would behoove them to do it again tonight on the road. I think if you see them get a lead, particularly early on, kind of hit the Panthers back in the mouth, I think then that seed of doubt grows a little bit more, because I talked about at the beginning about the championship pedigree that the Panthers have, and that is true. But make no mistake, the Panthers also understand that the Lightning have a bunch of championship-like players on their side as well.
Mm-hmm.
That if you give them confidence that they can get back into a series, you don't want them to start finding their game, maybe at the right time, with an opportunity to go back at Amalie Arena and maybe go up 3-2. A lot has to be done. But I think getting the lead, it's one of those keys to any game that you can put there every single time and it makes sense. Who's going to disagree with you? And particularly a team that's playing well defensively.
Well, the Kings have had, I just mentioned, the Kings have had some leads and they've not been able to lock it down. But yes, you want to be able, I mean, for these two teams that have predicated so much of what they want to do on defending, I think they certainly want to settle into that game where they can dictate the terms a little bit more because they're up. On the other hand, if the team that's down gets momentum like Edmonton has in some of these games, and the Oilers can throw McDavid and Draisaitl out there again and again and again and again, like they are great players.
Yeah.
And it can be hard to contain them, particularly when they have a little juice going. But the Edmonton situation aside, I think the Lightning have played some of their best hockey in the series, not for an extended period of time because they haven't had a lead for an extended period of time. But they played some of their best hockey when they were up, and the Panthers have played really, really well for the bulk of the series, and they've played some of their best hockey when they've been up. We'll see if that continues.
We will, because that will be
special teams. Like, okay, the Panthers had the great game one, but both power plays, the Lightning really throughout the series, and the Panthers since game one, both power plays have been foiled, and that can shift the balance a little bit, right? Because if you're down one and you get a power play and score, that changes the dynamic. That's why the penalty kill units have really they've had a big vote for the winning team in all three of the games. I understand the Lightning went 0 for 5 in game 3, but they scored other ways. They were able to win the game in large part, in my opinion, because they went 4 for 4 in the penalty kill. Some of those kills came when it was 1-1. Some of those kills, came when they were up, but they were able to maintain their lead. So,
Tampa Bay on X said, we had no business losing game 2. Hopefully, with how last game went and Hagel being back adds a very big spark to turn the series over.
I don't know about no business losing game 2. I mean, let's give some credit to how the Panthers defended in that game. They were like, what did you call them? The Iron Curtain, or you referred to
whatever I use. Yeah.
Look, right. I mean, part of the reason why Bobrovsky has a goals against average in the series of like 2, a little bit more than 2, is the team in front of him. Now, I will say he played pretty well in the first period of game 1. The Lightning had some looks in front. He stopped them. Yeah. He's not been particularly tested, though, since then until game 3. But a big reason for that is the team in front of him has been so good for most of the first 2 games and then for the early part of game 3. But that changed. It changed when the Lightning tied the game in game 3. Panthers level, defensive level, dropped a little bit. Not much.
Sure.
But a little bit.
And I think, that's one of those situations where you give them the benefit of the doubt that they're going to be stout defensively, and then some things happen in a game where maybe you say to yourself, okay, the other side bleeds a little bit as well. Yeah. And they're cut. And I think that's the mentality the Lightning should have going into a game tonight is, okay, you've seen the Panthers' best players fumble some situations. That should give you a little confidence that it's not going to happen every game. But you're not dealing with, again, I've given this example before, the Devils of the mid-'90s when it was just suffocating defense left and right. You couldn't penetrate.
Yeah.
Until you got to Marty Brodeur, and even he was, an outstanding goaltender that you had the last line of defense to deal with. So I think there's going to be opportunities here tonight. But I do think how both teams play in terms of being buttoned up and the extra stuff. Like Eric Chernak tonight, partner, if I'm him, unless somebody takes a run at one of your players and it's so egregious that you've got to do something, I'm probably backing away. I'm not doing anything dumb. Don't give the Panthers any life. I know Yanni Gourds want to mix it. Look, Brandon Hagel, as far as I'm concerned, to me, he should be dialed in and just not wanting to do any of the other stuff, but get right in there and create chaos like he typically does. But let the other stuff. Bennett wants to do something to Kucherov, after post whistle. Just be smart about it. Because at this point, I think both teams understand, you would think, the implications of tonight. Winning tonight, I think, I don't want to say you're in the driver's seat, but man, you're looking a lot better if you're Tampa Bay than you did, coming into these two games against the Panthers. So to me, that will be interesting. And happy birthday to Luke Glendening, by the way.
Yeah.
He's 36.
36 years old today.
Let us know. Young. He's a young man.
He is a young man.
36. How about him? Good for him scoring a goal, too.
Yeah.
That's, you don't
Nice
get
finish.
It. Was a nice finish.
Yeah.
You don't expect those things. You expect Kucherov and Gensel to have games. You don't.
Hey,
expect
before
Gensel.
you get to the next question, I just want to mention, because I teed this up at the top while you were rejoining us.
Yeah.
So the way the Lightning ran the lines today, this is a guess on my part, because we're going to find out at warm-ups. I think Mitchell Chaffee stays in. I like Chaffee's game in Game 3. I mean, he played a hard-nosed game, played a physical game.
Yeah.
I thought he was on pucks. And the Girgensons-Glendening line with Chaffee was effective, and I think that's going to stay a line. He was skating with them this morning. I think Coop likes that as a three-person line as opposed to 11 and 7 where Glendening and Girgensons are the line with two, and there's a rotating guy. So what does that mean for the lineup? I think the Lightning are keeping their 7 defensemen in. And again, they just had a win using 11 and 7. So with Hagel coming back, what does this mean? You got Gensel with Point and Kucherov. You've got Nick Paul with Gonsalves and Gord. The other line, Cirelli took a maintenance day. Hagel, Geekie, Atkinson. I think Cirelli comes in, plays with Hagel. That's the line with two. I think your scratches are Atkinson and Geekie. And I think that this is more about what Chaffee did in Game 3 than anything else. And the fact that he has a little something going with Girgensons and Glendening. I think the Lightning like that, even though Gord was out there with Glendening when they scored the fourth goal. That's a guess on my part. We'll see.
It's a good guess. And that's why people want to come
basing
here.
it on how they ran the lines this morning and what I saw with my own two eyes from Chaffee in Game 3.
When he plays that physical brand of hockey, he can be effective.
Yeah.
I think that's kind of his game. He's got a good shot. We've talked about that. He's got speed. But are you going to be a top 6 on this team? No, so you got to play a certain way.
Mm-hmm.
And what is that play? Straight up and down. Use your speed and use your size. I think he can be super valuable. Add some youth a little bit too into that lineup. I kind of like that. I'm with you there. And let's see if it plays out.
Consistency has eluded him this year. Now some of it's just been numbers, I think, down the stretch, because when he's gotten in, I feel that he's trying to make an impression and stay in a productive way, not like abandoning what got him here. He is engaged and he is physical. You remember the Lightning had that game against the Islanders in New York, where Glendening was home for the birth of his child. So Chaffee came in. I loved Chaffee's game, but then he was scratched the next game because Glendening returned. So I think more recently he's been a little bit of a victim of the numbers game. But as a whole this year, he has not had consistency to his performance game in, game out, which is why he found himself kind of right on the scratch line, essentially, particularly after the Lightning made the deadline deals for Gord and Bjorkstrand. So, look, if he keeps playing like he did in Game 3, assuming he is in Game 4 and has another game like it, he is going to stay in the lineup. He is. But let's see if he can do it again.
Right there with you, 100% at Bolts Radio, if you want to get involved in the conversation. Let's see here. Ryan says, the Lightning seem to be checking Forsling more often this series than I remember from last playoffs. It's good to see. It's great to see Cooch enjoying a little villain status in Florida, too. Not just enjoying, but embracing their hacks and slashes, but also stirring a mischief and getting in their heads. He looked relaxed and like he was having fun.
Well, he did mix it up after some whistles, particularly the one at the end of the second period. I don't know. Cooch seems to achieve villain status wherever he goes, right? He doesn't have to do much to achieve villain status, particularly when he burns the other team as much as he tends to burn them. He's moving up the ranks again with, he's like third in 3-point games in the playoffs or something crazy like that. Number of 3-point games. I may be getting the stat wrong. But I will actually differ a little bit from what the fan said about checking Forsling. The two errors that were most noticeable for Forsling on games 1 and 2, thank you, Steve, Cooch is tied for the third most 3-point games in the playoffs. So those are just mistakes by Forsling. It wasn't due to the Lightning checking him and him losing the puck. I mean, he is not the biggest guy in the world, but he is he is one of the best defensemen in the NHL.
Yeah.
I mean, he's not going to be Cale Makar. He's not going to be Quinn Hughes because he doesn't have the same dazzling offensive ability. I mean, he can play offense and he can score. He scored some goals against the Lightning in the playoffs even. But his bread and butter is just rock solid consistency, and the fact that he's not, 6'3", 220 doesn't work against him because he's so smart. Right. He can anticipate a hit and get rid of the puck before the player reaches him, the forechecking player, or he eludes the check enough that he can still make the play. He's a guy, he makes the play. That's what he is. He's a defenseman who makes the play. With the puck, without the puck, he makes the play. Game 3, twice at least, he didn't make the play. And then he took 2 other minuses. I didn't go back and watch the Goaltending goal to see, because the one defenseman back was Ekblad, so I'm not sure what happened to Forsling on that goal. But the first 2 for sure kind of started with Forsling having an error, which, again, if you're the Lightning, you cannot presume that is going to be happening regularly moving forward in the series. I have not noticed that they've gotten in on the forecheck and checked Forsling, though, which is kind of what the fan was.
Yeah, right. Look, I'm all for it. I mean, I think it's a good strategy. If you want to wear somebody down, easier said than done, again, because that guy, I think, knows how to avoid contact, when he's back there, when to make a play and when not to. Basil says, the Tkachuk hit exemplifies a part of the hockey culture that I despise. Losing team in lopsided games starts taking runs at winning team with intent to injure. Bolts do it too. It's childish and bad for the sport.
It happens.
I don't disagree in terms of we see this a lot, and I think it is a turnoff for a lot of people. I do think sometimes this is where officiating isn't at its best because
they threw him out of the game essentially, though.
They did.
Gave him a 5-minute major with 5 minutes left.
But why did he feel compelled to make a hit like that and think it was okay? I think it's happened enough where sometimes those hits, you don't know. I mean, we're having a conversation about, do we think Hagel's going to get suspended or not? Are they going to review it or not? And then, the same thing with Tkachuk. I think there's inconsistencies all the way around. Whether you agree with it or not, this is kind of what happens with playoff hockey. Mm-hmm. There are liberties that are taken, and there's a certain level of you got to take it and move on. And I think you typically see more penalties called earlier in this series than later. I think that's pretty evident sometimes when that does happen. I don't think the officials want to be the GOAT, even though sometimes they are directly impacting by not calling it. We've had that conversation before. I just think, too, the league doesn't do a great job of protecting its star players in those settings. And I think however you want to go about doing that moving forward would be something that I would take a look at as a league and say, this is about growing the game. And this is about wanting to see Kucherov on a regular basis, wanting to see Barkov and all of these great players. And if you're allowed to do certain things in the postseason to players like that, and it's been part of hockey for over, generations, at least the last 10, 15 years, I do think it's something that needs to be addressed. There's all these rule changes and how to make the game better, how to make the game safer. Part of it is just protect your stars. It's okay. It happens in every other sport. This is my opinion, not anybody else's. Where I would look at that. And do you avoid then the hits that we have seen not only in this series but in the other series? Maybe you would. Maybe you would. Tough to say, but I'd like to see that, Basil, from that perspective. Anthony says, no adjustment on the power play entries for some reason. I want points skating last with the puck, then spread them around. Some safe passes inside the zone. Keep possession longer to wear down forecheck. Also need more 5-hole shots, especially with a screen.
Well, look, Anthony, those are all fair comments. I mean, there have been points where Braden Point has been the guy to carry it in, and sometimes it's the play just outside the blue line that gets broken up. Sometimes it's the play just inside the blue line that gets broken up. And I think Point has been that guy sometimes as well, right?
Yeah.
It hasn't only been Kucherov. It's usually him or Kucherov, sometimes Hedman on the first unit. But I think that's a fair comment that, look, when the Lightning have gone, 1 for 13 in the power play, a lot has not gone right. They've had trouble re-entering the zone. For the most part, they've not done well on power play face-offs. I think they were closer to 50% in Game 3, and it was the first game in the series where they won the face-off battle. But I still don't think that they were over 50% on power play face-offs. And re-entering the zone has been a problem. Generating shots has been a problem. Forcing Bobrovsky to make saves has been a problem. I mean, they just have not had a dynamic power play. So, I mean, Anthony's comments are fair, certainly, where, I mean, I don't know about wearing down the penalty kill unit intentionally. It's almost like ball control, right? I understand what he's saying about short, safe passes. They are aggressive, though. So they're not just going to let you move it around how you want. They are pressuring you and forcing you to make a quick decision. And sometimes the Lightning haven't made the right decision. And when they've made the right decision, they haven't really done anything with it, right? You figure that someone's going to be out of position for Florida. So more shots to the net, I agree with that. It doesn't have to be the perfect play. Keep in mind, too, they're still adjusting to no Bjorkstrand. So Hagel goes back in that first power play, and they didn't have Hagel in the last game. And in Game 2, they didn't have Radish. That was a lineup decision that they made. So tonight, let's see how they do on the power play. I don't know if they're going to keep getting 5 power play chances a game, which is what they've got in the last 2 games, though. So they may have to make the most of it. I will maintain, though, and I know I've said this until I'm blue in the face, the penalty kill to me is more important than the power play. Now, you look at some of these other series, the Kings have had a great power play. It really helped them win the first 2 games. Toronto has had a great power play. It's helped them win the first 3 games in that series. Edmonton has come back in the last 2 games in part because their power play has gotten going. Power play proficiency can help you, but it's more about if the penalty kill team did its job, right, that would work to their advantage. I guess what I'm saying is, the Lightning scored 5 goals in Game 3. One was an empty netter. One was 4-on-4. But they scored even strength. They were able to win that game with a dry power play. How are they able to win the game with a dry power play? In part because their penalty kill came up huge. So that's kind of how I look at it. I'd like to see their power play be more dynamic because a night where you have success in the power play can really, really help you offensively. It's just, I'd rather have the stingy penalty kill, honestly. I mean, both to be great. But
sure. No doubt about it. Anthony also says, good to see some adjustments work. I thought Panthers were overwhelmed by physical pushback after Game 1. Boys need to keep this up because they will try to impose in the first. Weak side forwards still can provide more support when they rim it around, maybe cheats the boards. So more of a tactical approach there from Anthony.
Yeah, I think the Panthers have continued to give as good as they've gotten. I mean, they certainly have. Again, we talk about the hit stat, whatever. But the people who are tracking it, it's been in both buildings. The Panthers out hit the Lightning in all 3 games. So, I mean, the Panthers haven't backed down, not at all. The Rims, I mean, I think the Lightning have done okay on the dump in to get the puck.
Yeah.
Like he's saying the weak side forward. So basically what he's saying is, like, let's say Forsling was on the left side of the ice, or the left winger, Verhaeghe, skates down the ice, gets to the red line. When he dumps it in, it's a lot of times they're doing a hard rim. So it's around the boards. It's zipping behind the net. It's coming. It's like a pinball almost, like sliding around the boards, coming around to the other side. So what Anthony is saying is, like, the D, you're going to have a hard time getting to that puck. The weak side forward for the Lightning needs to cover that side because the right winger for the Panthers is anticipating it and coming to it. Okay, fair enough. I can't say that I've noticed, though, that the Lightning's problems have been not getting the puck when the Panthers dump it in. Sometimes that's happened. Their bigger problem when they've had problems is when they get the puck, but the Panthers' forecheck has created problems for them. And they can't get the puck out.
Yep.
They're shooting it into a body. They're trying to pass it out. It gets deflected. A guy's 5 feet from the blue line. Can't make the play to get it out. Now it's coming back the other way. They try the flip. It's a weak flip. The Panthers glove it down. So, I mean, that's what I've seen more, Anthony. But, again, I'm not tracking every single dump in maybe like you are. I don't mean that like facetiously. Maybe you are. You know, maybe you're watching this and you're like, okay, this dump in, this dump in, this dump in. They're retrieving the puck. Sure. I'm just reacting to what I'm seeing in the moment. And what I have seen as a bigger problem is less about the Lightning not actually having the puck in the defensive zone, where it's like dumped in and they just can't get it and they're chasing around. It's more that they have the puck and that first chance to clear is unsuccessful. When they have struggled, like the second half of Game 3, I thought they did a much better job for the most part. The Panthers had a very dangerous shift at the end of second period, which led to the penalty that was called on Tkachuk, actually. The Panthers got a penalty after that post-whistle scrum, but that whistle ended a shift where the Panthers had a lot of pressure. Bennett had a couple of chances. Rodriguez was out there with them. He had a chance. So that was a problem shift for the Lightning. But in the second half of the game, that was one of the few that they had 5-on-5.
Christian on X says, good. Chafee has been a great addition to the bottom 6. That line has been much more effective with him on it, in my opinion.
Well, don't take it to the bank yet, Christian. I'm just giving you my opinion based on how I read what they did with the lines at the morning skate. But that's a vote for Chafee and from Christian.
And look, a lot of times, too, when you're dealing with your bottom 6, you may go with players who are playing better at the time to put them in the lineup as well. You know, you want to try and generate as much of an advantage as you can, and if it works, you might as well stay with it, you know, until it doesn't. And, you know, as I said before with Chafee, he should be, every game he gets in, he should be looking at it as an opportunity to prove that he should be staying in the lineup. And I think that's the mentality he should have, which is a good segue into this one, partner. Dusty on X says, I'm agreeing with Dave on sitting Geeky. He just seems to be skating and nothing else. He's a year away and may just a series away.
Yeah, it says serious. I think he meant series. We'll see. I mean, Geeky did hit the post in Game 3. Geeky's shot is...
It's a good one.
It's going to cause problems for the other team.
Yeah, it's a good one. Yeah.
But I'm seeing what I noted on the line rushes, and I'm giving you my opinion based on what I saw.
Yeah.
And I think it's probably more about Chafee and what he did in Game 3.
It's more about you, not me. When you start talking about that. And look, I think having Geeky up here to be in this environment and to be playing here and there, practicing, I think that's going to help his growth as an NHL player. Mm-hmm. You know, there's nothing like experience. And he's getting that. Now, whether he's not playing the rest of the series, however long that is, because somebody else is taking the spot, that's fine. I think for him, he, when he was brought back up, I think people wanted to see him, at least I did, use that bigger body in a way that could have been beneficial. He's got a big shot. Maybe don't pass up that shot as much. Don't defer. It's okay to get it on net. It's his biggest weapon, maybe, And I think that'll be something as he gets better and the skating gets better, things that he's talked about working on. I think he's going to have a chance to be a very big part of this Lightning team. Maybe it does happen again in the playoffs, but I tend to agree with both of you guys that, if you are going to make a lineup change, I think that's the low-hanging fruit that you could take him out and do what you're going to do. So let's see if it plays out that way. Al says from yesterday, partner, Perbix had a good game. His best in a long time.
Al, I thought Perbix had some good games down the stretch in the regular season. I remember a couple where Phil and I were noting how well he played. But look, the Lightning core of D did not have a good game one, up and down the lineup. We addressed that when a lot of the fans were picking on the guys near the bottom of the
easy
seven.
to do.
And we were like, look, McDonough and Chernak, they had problems in game one. Hedman had a problem in game one. I mean, it was collective. And I thought, I said this on the show yesterday with Greg. I thought the Lightning I'd give them a moderate grade defensively in game three because they struggled in the first period. Some of that was just the Panthers came out flying, right? And they got the lead, and that was momentum based, and the crowd was buzzing and all of that. But if we're just looking at how they defended, and that's team wide, but includes the 7 defensemen, I'm not sure this was an A-plus defensive performance for the Lightning. That's why I made Vasilevsky a star in the game. He had a very important role in keeping the Panthers to 1 goal. This was not a suffocating defensive performance for the Lightning. Having said that, particularly once the game got tied and then when the Lightning got the lead, I thought the 7D settled in and kind of took care of their business pretty well.
At Bolts Radio, if you want to get involved in the conversation. You know who the Lightning could use to get back to where he was before the injury was J.J. Moser. I feel like he's been good, but I feel like before the injury he was. Remember, I made the comparison a little bit like Anton Strawman. He just seems kind of solid, and you knew what you were going to get back there. And not that you haven't gotten that at all. I just think it's been his game. It's been harder to find coming back.
It'll be interesting when the Lightning season ends and they do the exit interviews, what he has to say about like pre-injury, post-injury.
If he's been dealing with anything too. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I think that would be one of those where if his game upticked a little bit more, and I think he's starting to find his groove. And look, there's nothing better than finding your groove than being thrown in to these pressure-packed situations. And you got to get to your game quickly. If not, you're going to be exposed probably more so than whenever.
Yeah.
I think it would be very beneficial to the Lightning if Moser can get back somehow, some way to his standard pre-injury. May not happen. I don't know, but that's one of those things we don't talk often about because you're out there and you just assume a guy is okay if you're healthy enough to play. There's no excuses, but we do know that hockey players battle through things, and that is going to be something that we monitor. So the game tonight is at 7. Pre-game is going to be at 6:30. Same cast of characters. I will talk to you closer to puck dropping. You're going to have Kobe with you.
Yes,
tonight.
Kobe is in for game 4.
That'll be a lot of fun, and I'm sure he'll be intense and fired up as he can be, which is always adding to the broadcast. And then we'll be back in this setting doing tomorrow. The show. Now, are we going to tape or are we going to go? I say we're going to do it now. Are we going to do live? Because you're probably leaving right after the game. I would assume.
I'll be back in Tampa tomorrow.
So we can go whenever. Yeah, we'll
discuss.
We'll discuss. But get your questions in regardless. It can be after this show. It could be during the game tonight. It can be after the game. Get them in. And you guys
know because the Lightning won game 3, there will be a game 5.
There will be
on Wednesday. 5. So there will be at least one more home game. And we'll see if the Lightning enter that game down 3-1 or tied 2-2. That's what we're going to find out. We're going to get the answer to that question tonight.
It's going to be a lot of fun tonight. These are if you're a fan, you love these moments. Your team's got to win, and hostile environment. So it should be a lot of fun. Partner, great job as
Yeah, you
always.
too.
And I will talk to you tomorrow, or actually talk to you tonight. Thanks
Yes.
to Steve Ersnick and Jared Johnson as well. And thanks to all of you for listening. We always appreciate it. I'm Greg Linnelli. You've been listening to Power Lunch on Lightning Radio.